the last video, we did an example where we had this last term here was negative, but in this example, we have the middle term, our b term, if you will, is negative. So we are going to use the same process we used in the previous two videos, and what we're going to do is we're going to multiply our first term times our last term. So let's do that right here. I'm going to write 5x squared times a 4, okay? And that's going to give me 20x squared. And then I'm going to place my middle term down here. So that's a negative 9x, and notice that I brought that negative sign with it. That is very important. You need to make sure you have that. So what I'm looking for are two terms that will multiply to give me 20x squared and will add to give me negative 9x. So I'm going to go ahead and list out off to the side here the factors of 20. This top number here. Okay, I'm just going to list it without the x squared for now so we can figure out what the factors of 20 are. So we'll start with 1 and 20, and then 2 and 10, and then 3. Oh, doesn't look like 3 goes into 20, so we'll cross that out. So we have 4 and 5. 4 goes into 25 times. And then we have 5 and, 4 again. Okay, so we can stop, because this is actually the same as this, okay? So we don't even really need to look at that. So I have 3 cases here. I have 1 times 20, 2 times 10, and 4 times 5. So the question is, what combo of those numbers will add to give me a negative 9? And some of you are probably already thinking, well, those numbers are positive, and those cannot add to give me a negative 9. But what I like to do is I like to go through and just kind of see 1 plus 20, that's 21, so that's probably not going to work. And if I were to subtract 20 minus 1, that gives me 19, so this is probably not going to work. 2 and 10 are going to add to give me 12. If I subtract 2 from 10, that gives me 8. None of those combos are going to give me 9. Okay, so let's look at 4 and 5. So 4 times 5 is 20. But 4 plus 5 is positive 9. But if I were to use negative 4 and negative 5, those two, when I multiply a negative 4 times a negative 5, a negative times a negative does give me a positive 20. And if I were to add a negative 4 and a negative 5, that's going to give me a negative 9. Or if I were to subtract 5 from negative 4, that gives me a negative 9. So I found them. So those two terms are negative 4 and negative 5. Those two numbers are negative 4 and negative 5. But don't forget to put an x next to them, because that reminds me of what I need to put in my box over here. Because remember, x times x is x squared, and whenever I add these two, the x stays x. Okay. All right, so let's go over to our box now. So if we recall, we're going to put our first term here in this first box, 5x squared, and our last term, positive 4, goes here, and it does not matter where the negative 4x goes or the negative 5x goes. If you reverse those and did these in if you've put negative 4x in that one right there, it doesn't matter. You'll get the same answer. Your order will just be different for the numbers that end up being here. So you're welcome to try that and compare your answers, but it should still work out. All right, so now again, we want to find the GCF of each row and each column, but the reality is that I really only have to find the GCF of one row. Okay, and then everything else kind of falls into place. So let's see if we can find the GCF of 5 and negative 4. So the biggest number that goes into 5 and negative 4 is actually going to be a 1. And then my rule for finding the GCF of whatever variables are there is to look at the smallest exponent value with the variable. So I have an x squared here, and I have an x to the first here with this x. So the smallest exponent value is x to the first. So I'm going to write an x. And then everything kind of falls into place here. So ask yourself, what times, let me change colors here, what times 1 will give me 5? Well, that's a 5. And then what times x gives me x squared? Well, that's an x. Okay, what times 1 gives me a negative 4? So be careful here, because remember, a positive times a negative will give me a negative. So this needs to be a negative 4. And this x does not carry with this 4 over here, so do not do that. Okay, so this is just the 4s, and you can go back and double check here. 1x times negative 4 does in fact give me negative 4x. Okay, now let's go to this one right here. So what times 5 gives me a negative 5? So remember, a positive times a negative is going to be a negative, so that's a negative 1. And then because this has an x, I do not need to put an x right here. So don't do that, because that will be this x right here. Whenever I multiply 5x times negative 1, I will get negative 5x. Okay, and then lastly, I always like to check, is negative 1 times a negative 4 equal to a positive 4? And yes, it is. Okay, so my factors are these numbers, are these right here. Okay, these are my factors. So if I wanted to factor my original equation, this will be 5x minus 4 times, and I'm not going to write 1x, okay, because see how I have a 1x, because we usually don't write the 1 and the coefficient 1 in front of the x. I'm going to write it as x minus 1. And this is your final answer. So hopefully that helped you. I'm planning on doing another video in the case where both of these numbers here and here are negative, but there are also some other videos that you can check out, and I'll make sure to link the playlist to all those other videos in the description as well. If this helps you, please go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe, or share it with somebody you think that it will help. And I will see you all in the next video, and hopefully you learned something today. Y'all have a great day.